guys, and welcome back to Beauty and the Bookcase, where we take a book and we make a look. Today's episode is all about Jane Austen's sassiest, most oddly mysterious, and absolutely enraging novel, Northanger Abbey. And no, I don't mean it's enraging because it's bad. It's just, it has some of the most obnoxiously frustrating characters. And I say that as somebody who read Emma. So let's get into it. Now, when I was doing my undergrad, I took a course that specifically focused on Jane Austen. So I've read a majority of her work. From Pride and Prejudice to what, in my opinion, the better Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Mansfield Park, and Persuasion. And as you can tell from that intro, clearly Sense and Sensibility was my favorite. That was until I read Northanger Abbey. This is, quite frankly, by far my favorite Jane Austen book. To be completely honest with you guys, since I read all of her other books kind of all in a row, it took me a bit because, like I said, I enjoyed it the first few and then it was just kind of overloaded. It was like, okay, I need a break. And yeah, and I had that break for a while before actually going into reading Northanger Abbey. And may I just say, this book gave me every emotion in the book. And I mean actual visceral rage, shipping, all sorts of emotions. And to be quite honest with you, I feel like this book doesn't get the recognition it deserves. Like I said, you know, we often talk about books like Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and even Emma, since that became the wonderful classic movie that we now know as Clueless. But I really hadn't even heard of Northanger Abbey until one of my friends, who is a big Jane Austen fan, kind of mentioned it in passing and was like, well, I think you'd really like this one, so you should give it a go. And I'm very glad that I listened to her. Because, to be completely honest with you, I'd say this book is up there with my favorites, which says a lot just for the simple fact that, you know, the books I normally prefer to read and fall in love with are things like The Portrait of Dorian Gray, or, as I've mentioned about 1,001 times, Crime and Punishment. I like the more realistic, depressing books, which is not a category I would put Austen in. But this book, I don't know, I just loved it. So if for some weird reason you grew up in like a parallel dimension or something and have no idea who Jane Austen is, she is one of the most famous authors out there. She was born in 1775 in England. Her novels mainly focused on following the lives of 18th century rich people, essentially. And of course, some of her main focuses were marriage, social status, and, well, prejudice. To be quite frank, her social commentary is just surrounded by so much just sass that is sure to give you some very interesting insults to hurl at friends and enemies alike. Her work has had just such reach, and it has such a huge impact, not only in literature, but a lot of it has become film, has been adapted into film and TV shows. Like I said, Clueless was inspired by the book Emma, but there are more direct, I guess, adaptations. Yeah, like I think there's like 2 for Pride and Prejudice. Northanger Abbey, I recently found out, has one that I need to see. Emma as well. So a lot of them have been adapted. So if you don't want to read, watch this video to kind of get an understanding of the plot and then watch the movie. So Northanger Abbey is actually focused on the story of a girl named Catherine. Now, Catherine came from kind of the British countryside, and she traveled to Bath with her family friends, the Allens. In Bath, she met a girl by the name Isabel, and they quickly became close friends. Now let me preface all of this by saying that Isabel Thorpe is the most hateful character ever written, aside from maybe Arturito in La Casa de Papel, and I'm really sad terrible things don't happen to her. At the start, Isabella is actually pretty likable. She takes an immediate liking to our main girl, Catherine, and she really incorporates her into her social life. And they become quite close friends, with Isabella asking Catherine for advice often and just spending a lot of time together. And even though she's kind of crazy and full of herself, we do forgive her because, hey, she's nice to her girl Catherine, so she can't be all bad. Boy, was I wrong about that one. Now, among Isabella's siblings, she has a brother named John. How do I politely describe John to you? John, to be completely honest with you, John is a narcissist. He is incapable of ever admitting that he is wrong, and he doesn't actually care about Catherine. I don't believe that for a second. For his hurt and whatever as he acts, I don't buy it. He's constantly disregarding her feelings and just, I don't know, it's more like he wants to marry her for the idea of being married or the idea of like owning her than because he actually is into her as a person. And you know, Catherine, I don't know, she says she wasn't aware of it. I doubt that she was that naive that she wouldn't notice because he was kind of intense. But she says she didn't actually notice that he was into her, but she's also kind of very obvious and clear in the way that she treats him by avoiding him like the plague while still trying to keep her friendship with Isabella. It kind of says like, hey, I'm not that into you. But either because he's a narcissist, or I don't know, maybe he's just dumb, or because he just doesn't want to take no as an answer, he entirely ignores the fact that she's obviously not into him and continues to pursue her like a psycho. So after that, Isabella falls in love with James Morland, who is Catherine's brother, and things are pretty good for a while. Now, so at one point we meet Henry Tilney for the first time, and all you need to know about Henry Tilney is he's basically like Jane Austen's Timothée Chalamet. Like, if somebody redid the adaptation, I have like zero doubts that the guy who would play Henry would be Timothée Chalamet. So anyway, so she meets this guy and she's obviously like super in love with him. She's like, oh my god, he's so handsome, love him. But he disappears for a while and she's, you know, trying to forget about him until one day he comes back to Bath. So Catherine and Henry originally met at a ball because of course they did. It's a Jane Austen novel, keep up, everyone meets at a ball. And she then befriends his sister, Eleanor. And Eleanor is just this super nice, beautiful girl that I am incredibly surprised Jane Austen didn't name Jane, because we all know she's done that before. But anyway, they meet, they get on super well, and without Catherine being like, hey, I'm super into your Timothée Chalamet-like brother, Eleanor kind of knows. So whatever, they become super close friends, it's all great and super fun. But of course, it can't stay being that way because the Thorpes exist in this universe. So of course, frickin' John and Isabella have to go and mess stuff up, and it's especially frustrating in one scene where they make plans with Catherine without actually, asking her about them. And then when she comes back, she's like, well, no, I actually just made plans with Eleanor. So yeah, you guys have fun. And then freaking Isabella pulls this lovely move in which she goes like, oh, well, if you're not gonna go, then I'm not gonna go. So you spoiled all the fun. Good job. And as someone who has had somebody actually do that to me, if you have anybody ever pull that maneuver on you, run, because they're toxic. So essentially then John, because he's garbage, goes after Eleanor and goes like, actually she forgot she made plans with us, so she's not gonna hang out with you tomorrow. And when Catherine finds out, she flips and like tells them that they kind of suck in her super polite way, and then runs after Eleanor and they make up and it's all's well that ends well, you know? Well, except for Isabel, who's like annoying and like has a whole hissy fit because apparently Catherine can only have one friend. Anyway, we finally get to Northanger Abbey, and Jane Austen is apparently a really good mystery writer and should have explored that more. But in short, some more drama happens with Mr. Tilney, and Eleanor has to go back home. Not Eleanor. Eleanor's already home. Catherine has to go back home, and she thinks she's never going to see Henry again, but they have a happy ending because of course they do. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. So, first thing I want to talk about is actually Eleanor and Catherine's relationship. Now, like I said, I absolutely freaking shipped her with Henry. Like at every point I was like, oh my god, I hope he returns. So when he returned, I was like, yes, he returned. And then stuff kept happening. But yeah, shipped them, loved them. Unlike unlike John, he actually seemed interested in Catherine's thoughts. He wanted to get to know her. He wanted to get her opinion on things. He just seemed to have more interest in her as a person as opposed to just general interest in her as like an idea of a person. So it's really nice. I mean, he picks on her, but that seems to like be his thing. He's just kind of that type of person. And yeah, he's great. But what I really want to compare Eleanor to in her relationship with Catherine is how different it is from her relationship with Isabella. Because Isabella's relationship with Catherine still mostly revolves around Isabella and what she wants and, you know, what she wants to do, what she needs. And she's not a great friend, especially, you know, there's a part in which Isabella is openly flirting with the eldest Tilney brother, not Henry, there's another one, like in front of Eleanor's face, in front of Catherine's face, even though she was already engaged to James, her brother. She's horrible. Like, you think I'm being dramatic, and then you read this book and you realize she's like the worst. I don't know, maybe I just felt like really stressed about it because I feel like I know, like I've met people like her in my life, and I'm just like, we're not going back down that way. Run away, Catherine. On the other hand, Eleanor is like such a nice friend, even when they have maybe like disagreements or there's a misunderstanding, usually brought on by Isabella and John because they suck. Like they always want to apologize immediately. They want to make up. They care about each other's feelings and about each other's well-being, and it's such a healthy, constructive relationship. Like at no point, you know, many times, especially nowadays, there's a whole trope about kind of like, oh, you know, these girls that become friends and then one of them becomes popular and like she like tries to tear down the girl who used to be her best friend or something and it's super toxic. So it's nice to just see some wholesome friendship between two girls who are awesome. And I just thought that was really interesting and that was really cool. Just kind of showing that bond and how it contrasts so sharply in the respect and the love and the interest that Eleanor showed as opposed to the self-interest and selfishness and just overall possessive, toxic nature of Isabella. It really seems like Eleanor takes Catherine into her world, whereas with Isabella's fickleness, who knows if had they stayed friends till the end of the book, if Isabella would have even actually continued the friendship. I don't know. She just doesn't seem like a type. She's very flaky. Now, speaking of Isabella, there is a running theme with her and just prejudice and greed. Because let me tell you, this girl is obsessed with money. But here's the thing, is with Jane Austen characters, when they're obsessed with money, they're usually pretty open about it. What I mean by that is that, you know, normally if a character in an Austen novel is meant to be like a really greedy character. Like they'll outright just be kind of like, I want you to marry this person, or I want to marry this person because they're so rich. And I mean, whatever, that's how rich people work, I guess. So at least they're upfront about it, and I can respect that. Whereas with Isabella, she starts off as this like slightly annoying but genuinely likable character, and then she's so rude. So there's this one scene when she's now engaged to James, Catherine's brother, and she finds out, she gets a letter from James, who's just spoken to his dad about his marriage to her, and the dad has been like, yeah, that's cool, I approve of this is how much money you're gonna get. And she's in front of her friend, daughter of this man, and she's like, after she went on this whole thing where she's like, no, I love him, I don't care about money, like James is just the one for me, and then she's like throwing a hissy fit because she's like, it's not enough money, and she tries to cover her ass and be like, no, like it's totally fine, like it's not about the money, I'm just like taking a bath. I don't know, like some bullshit excuses that I'm just like, girl, you don't believe this yourself, shut up, you suck. So yeah, she's very greedy, and then again, she's a bit of a social climber, and you know, I'm not one to want to ever shame people, but I think if you're upfront about things, like if you're a person who's just like, honestly, I just like to be with people for the sake of status, and I tell them that up front, that's cool, do your thing. But if you're going around engaged to someone being like, yes, I love him so much, he's the one, and then you shamelessly flirt with somebody else because they have a better social standing, and you do this in front of your best friend who also happens to be the sister of the person that you're engaged to, you're a horrible, horrible human being. So yeah, Isabella flirts with this dude, but thankfully she does kind of get her just desserts because the eldest Tilney was not really interested in the idea of marriage and settling down. So after she basically exposes herself for being a horrible person, he like bounces, he goes back to whatever military stuff he was doing, and she tries to like beg Catherine to like convince James to get back together with her. And Catherine is just like, do you really think I'm this stupid? And the answer is yes. She actually thought Catherine was that stupid, which also tells you that she thought very lowly of her, because she was like, oh, I like completely just cheated on her brother, and she's known, and obviously her brother has told her that our engagement is off because I'm a trash mammal. And she's still sending, she has the audacity to send Catherine this letter. She's like, oh my God, it was a misunderstanding. I don't know what he thought was happening, but it's not true. I need to help me. And I was so glad that Catherine was like, absolutely not. I was like, good for her, because Catherine, I mean, I get it, because same, but she's too nice for her own good. And sometimes I was just like, girl, stop. Like the worse Isabella got, the more I was like, oh my God, stop being friends with her. You have Eleanor now. Eleanor is like a saint. She's your girl. Stop. But of course, it wouldn't be a Jane Austen novel if there weren't other prejudiced, greedy people. And that is where Mr. Tilney comes in, with Henry and the military dudes and Eleanor's dad. So, because of freaking John Thorpe, this guy, Mr. Tilney, was under the impression that Catherine and her family had more money than they did. I didn't really understand that, because it's not like John wanted Catherine and Henry to get together. So I was really confused as to why, unless he was trying to like impress him and be like, ooh, this is gonna be my fiance, like she's great. He like lies about her having more money for some weird reason that's never really explained. Because then he's like, actually, just kidding, I was joking. It's weird. Anyway, he's a liar, but because of that, Mr. Tilney believes that she is more rich than she actually is. So he's like immediately obsessed with her, like inviting her into the home, like the home that they had in Bath, and then inviting her over to Northanger Abbey, which was their actual like home and just always complimenting her and caring about her opinion, and yeah, he's like super, super nice to her until he finds out that she's actually not rich. And then this man has the audacity, because he invited her to be in his home and he convinced her to stay longer than had originally been planned. And then he doesn't even give her like a proper heads up. He's just like, yeah, you need to leave my house. So she has to leave. She's super embarrassed. She's super confused, but she's blaming herself. You know, she's thinking, oh my God, I hurt this man. But no, he was just being a jerk and whatever. It ends up like, as I said, Henry and Catherine end up together. So whatever. But here's the thing. So not only is he prejudiced, but he's also very deceitful. He very much is one of those people that lives entirely off of appearances. What do I mean by that? Well, again, he only cared to have an association with Catherine because he thought, oh, you know, she's rich, so it'll look good. But we also have these interactions. It's very interesting. Okay. So throughout the whole book, Catherine is presented as this girl who was really into like mystery books, like obsessed with them. So when they're driving up to the Abbey, because Henry's a bit of a jokester, he's like messing around and telling Eleanor that like she's actually not gonna like the Abbey because it's haunted or something. And he starts telling her this like made up story that's actually, it's a pretty cute scene, I think, because you know, you can tell he's just messing with her and she's kind of aware of it, but at the same time, like he gets in her head. I don't know, I thought it was adorable, but maybe that's because I aggressively shipped them the entire time. So yeah, when she actually gets to the Abbey, she's kind of on edge because she starts to believe that maybe Henry wasn't joking. And then there's like this whole mystery with their mom who died. And Catherine starts to notice that Mr. Tilney is kind of suspicious, especially when it comes to like his wife. So she thinks he murdered her. And they say he didn't. I don't entirely believe that. But whatever. We're supposed to believe that he didn't murder his wife, even though he acts super, super suspicious about it. Whatever. So he's apparently not a murderer. But Catherine's like sixth sense about this wasn't really that off, I would say, because you can tell that there's clearly something going on with Mr. Thorpe and his, not Mr. Thorpe, with Mr. Tilney and his kids, because anytime he's around, the kids just get hella weird. Like they don't want to talk, they're not laughing, they're not being extroverted, they're not being their usual selves. And Austen, she's incredible because she just uses Catherine to sort of highlight this point. So we often have all these moments where Catherine's like, oh God, like we're stuck with Mr. Tilney and he's been so nice to me, but anytime he's around, like we don't have fun because he just makes everything weird. And there's kind of, I don't think she wanted to outright be like, hey, some of you rich people are abusive jerks. She kind of implies it. And very much in the same vein, we have our friends, the Thorpes. So the Thorpes are kind of masters of deceit. And I put that in quotations because honestly, like, John is not I don't think he's trying to deceive anyone, because I honestly think he's so full of himself that he doesn't realize he's awful. But yeah, like from the second you meet him, you're like, oh my God, I hope this guy gets run over by his fancy carriage. Spoiler, he doesn't. But so yeah, I mean, at first I was like, oh my God, I really hope that this isn't going to be like, oh, he turns out to be really great, because I hate him and I don't want her to. I do not, like, Catherine deserves better, okay? Yeah, so they don't end up together, thankfully. But he is kind of a master of deceit in the way that he interacts with other people and with Catherine herself, just to kind of get his way. You know, like I already mentioned, he kind of lied to Tilney about the fortune, and also lies to Eleanor about Catherine having plans with them when she didn't, and she had plans actually with Eleanor first. But there's also this whole scene in which Catherine had planned to go on a walk with the Tilneys, and she was super excited about it because she's like, yes, I get to spend time with both Eleanor and Henry. And then for some freaking reason, freaking John goes like, oh no, I saw them leaving town, so there's no use, you know, with you staying home because you're not going to come over. Like, I saw them leave. And Catherine, sweet Catherine, being so trusting as always, she believes him. And then as they're leaving, she sees them, like she sees Henry and Catherine, and she tells John to stop, and John actually speeds up because he's a horrible person who I hate very, very much. So his deceit is a bit more straightforward. He's just constantly doing shady stuff, but like out in the open, being like, hi, I'm shady, nice to meet you. Whereas with Isabella, it's a bit trickier because when we meet her, even if you might find her like a little like quirkily annoying, she's not bad. She actually seems to be a pretty good friend to Catherine and to seem to care and stuff. And then she ends up being like this greedy, awful person who's just after money, after status. And at the end of the day, I'm just surprised that she was even ever friends with Catherine, just because of her reaction to how little their dad could offer. Because it seems like she very much cared about her status and the people that she associated with. So it's a little odd. It was a bit odd for me that she ended up actually like that she actually wanted to be friends with Eleanor, even though she wasn't like super rich. So what's it really all about? At its core, Northanger Abbey is a book about prejudice, friendship, and deceit. It seems that what Austen was trying to show was that even though there is a lot of fakeness in higher society, you can still find some good people, which is, you know, kind of the Thorpes versus the Tilneys. Poor Catherine is jerked around, heartbroken, and terribly mistreated, but thankfully, once all the masks have fallen off, she's able to find some true, kind people. Honestly, I think anyone who hasn't read any Austen before should actually start with this book. It's shorter than other books. And I mean, it is a little different. Like I said, there's kind of like a mystery aspect to it, which I genuinely wish she had explored because she was so good at it. But it's still very much a standard formula for Austen's world. It really encapsulates her snark along with sort of that high-class romance meets social commentary, with at least a few hateable characters that you'll just hope get run over by a coach at some point. Have you realized that I hate freaking Thorpe so much? They're the worst. Like, I literally texted my best friend who recommended me to read this book, and I was like, why is Isabella like this? Why is John like this? I hate them. I would like verbally like I'm reading this book by myself and verbally just going like, oh my god, I hate you. So yeah, she's very good at writing really unlikable characters, but also likable characters. Like I said, I loved Catherine and I was rooting for her the whole time. Same with Henry. For me, this book is gonna get a 4.8 out of 5. It loses 0.2 points because honestly, I just really wanted the Tilneys to like die in a fire or something. I'm sorry, it's awful, but so are they. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and let me know in the comments who is your most hated character that you've ever just found in a book. Who do you want to run over with a chase? Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload every Wednesday and Sunday, and I will see you guys next time.